It was a routine day in the city when the police decided to stop a woman they had never seen before. She was a black woman, confidently walking down the street, unaware that she was about to be the center of a tense, high-stakes encounter. What seemed like a simple interaction quickly took a strange turn when the officers began to question her with a little too much curiosity. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Beneath her calm demeanor, this woman wasn't just another pedestrian. She was a CIA agent on a covert mission. As the tension built and the officers grew bolder, they unknowingly pushed a button that could lead to something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. What happens next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about power, deception, and secrets hidden in plain sight. Stay tuned to find out what happens when this game of cat and mouse takes an unexpected twist. As the officers pressed further, the woman remained composed, but her mind raced. She knew exactly how to handle situations like this. Her training had prepared her for moments when everything could go wrong. The CIA had taught her to keep her cool, to think on her feet, and to never reveal too much. But today, the stakes were higher than usual. This wasn't just a random stop. Something felt off, like the officers were trying to provoke her, pushing her limits. They were unaware that this was no ordinary interaction. She was on a mission, one that involved gathering critical intelligence. If they found out who she really was, everything could come crashing down. The officers, meanwhile, were growing impatient, their questions more aggressive. The tension between them was palpable, but the woman kept her secret close, knowing that one wrong move could change everything. What was it they really wanted to know? The woman's heart raced, but she hid it well. The officers were getting closer to something, and she could feel the pressure mounting with every word they exchanged. One of them, a younger officer, seemed particularly persistent. His gaze never left her, like he was trying to read her, trying to figure out what made her so different. The other officer, more experienced, kept his distance, watching the younger man closely. There was something about his demeanor that didn't sit right with her, a quiet intensity that seemed to be signaling something more than just a simple interrogation. As the questioning dragged on, the woman began to notice strange patterns in their behavior. The young officer kept asking oddly specific questions, questions she'd expect from someone who had done their homework. He wasn't just trying to figure out who she was. He was digging for something deeper. Her instincts screamed that there was more going on here than a random encounter. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, someone was watching. Someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was doing. A shadow moved quickly, blending with the crowd, unaware that the events unfolding were part of a much larger game. The woman had to decide whether to play along or take a risk that could expose everything. But what choice did she really have? With every second, the walls seemed to close in. The tension in the air was unbearable. The young officer stepped closer, his eyes narrowed as if he could sense something was off, but he couldn't quite place it. She felt his suspicion growing with each passing second. His questions had become sharper, more probing, and he was circling her like a predator. The older officer stood by, silently observing, but his posture had shifted. He was waiting for something, perhaps a sign, a slip of the tongue. His hands subtly twitched, just enough to signal that he wasn't as calm as he appeared. The woman knew the situation was about to break wide open. If she didn't act quickly, her cover would be blown. The mission was slipping through her fingers, and she couldn't afford to let that happen. A sense of urgency flooded her, but she kept her expression neutral, hoping to buy time. Her mind raced, calculating the next move, weighing the risks of every option. She had been in tight spots before, but this felt different. The feeling of being watched intensified, and she realized the shadow she'd sensed earlier was no coincidence. A sudden noise interrupted the stillness, a car door slamming shut in the distance. The officers turned momentarily, distracted. It was her only chance. She took a deep breath, her hand subtly reaching for the concealed device tucked beneath her jacket. Just as she was about to make her move, the young officer's voice cut through the air, more forceful than ever. "We're not done here." Her heart pounded. The game had just reached its breaking point. The words hung in the air like a trap closing in. "We're not done here." The young officer's voice was sharper now, his hand moving toward his radio. But as he reached for it, something unexpected happened. A flash of movement caught the woman's eye, too quick, too deliberate. A figure emerged from the crowd behind the officers, moving silently like a ghost. It was the same shadow she'd noticed earlier, but now it was clear who they were. Another agent, CIA or something else. She couldn't be sure, but she recognized the move. It was someone who had been following her. The newcomer's presence threw the officers into confusion. The older officer shot a look toward his partner, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. Something was off. The young officer's grip on his radio tightened, but before he could speak, a voice from the shadows called out, "You're wasting time. Leave her alone." The woman's heart skipped a beat. That voice, it wasn't just any stranger. It was someone she knew, someone who was supposed to be on her side. Yet the words didn't sit right. They felt like a warning. For a split second, everything froze. The crowd around them seemed to dissipate, the world narrowing down to these few tense moments. The newcomer took another step forward, but it wasn't the rescue she expected. It was something far more dangerous. The officer's confusion deepened, and the woman's mind raced. If this was a setup, who could she trust now? The stakes had just been raised, and she had no idea who was playing which side anymore. The tension in the air was suffocating. The newcomer stepped closer, but the woman's instincts told her to stay alert. She couldn't afford to trust anyone, especially not now. The older officer, now fully on edge, pulled his gun, his eyes darting between the woman and the mysterious figure in the crowd. "I said, leave her alone," he shouted, his voice cracking with tension. But the shadowed figure didn't flinch. Instead, it spoke again, this time with a chilling calmness. "You're not in control here." The woman's pulse quickened. She had only one option now: survive, no matter the cost. Without warning, she activated the small device hidden beneath her jacket. A loud, sharp beep echoed through the street, and instantly the air shifted. The crowd around them scattered, confusion and panic spreading like wildfire. The officers hesitated, disoriented by this sudden shift in the atmosphere. The woman moved in a blur of calculated motion, disarming the young officer with a quick strike before turning to face the newcomer. "Who are you?" she demanded, keeping her guard up, her voice low but steady. The figure slowly lowered their hood, revealing a familiar face. Her heart sank as recognition hit her like a punch to the gut. It was her partner, the one she trusted, the one she thought had been on the mission with her. But now, the cold look in his eyes told her everything. He wasn't here to help her. He was here to make sure she failed. "You've been compromised," he said, his voice cold. "The agency has other plans for you. You've outlived your usefulness." Her world tilted as the realization hit. This wasn't just a botched mission. It was a betrayal. The CIA had set her up, and she had been too focused on the mission to see it. As her mind raced, the younger officer slowly recovered, his hand gripping his radio again. But before he could speak, the woman made her decision. In one swift motion, she took down both the officers and her former partner, leaving them unconscious on the ground. But just as she turned to leave, a final twist of fate came crashing down. From the shadows, a third figure emerged, a senior CIA agent, one whose face she had never seen before. "You're not leaving that easily," he said, his tone dark and final. The woman froze. The game was far from over. The woman's mind raced as the senior agent advanced, but she didn't flinch. She'd been through too much to back down now. Without a word, she activated the last of her hidden resources, a powerful signal jammer that sent the agent's communications device into chaos. The man's eyes widened, realizing he had lost control. In that moment, she made a split-second decision. Turning on her heels, she sprinted through the chaos, blending with the fleeing crowd. The senior agent's shouts echoed behind her, but she was already too far ahead. She had no intention of staying for a confrontation she couldn't win. As she disappeared into the night, the weight of the betrayal hung heavily on her. The mission was compromised, but her survival wasn't. The game had shifted, and now she would play by her own rules. The CIA had underestimated her, and that in the end would be their biggest mistake.